Most people who dream about making an indie game picture the same version of the story. A small team, a clever idea, a Steam page, and a path to financial independence built on something they made themselves. The part nobody shows you is what the revenue breakdown looks like when the money actually comes in, and how much of the upside disappears before the developer ever sees a number. The economics of independent game development are not complicated, but they are specific in ways that most coverage skips entirely. Every platform, every publisher, every storefront, and every algorithm has a stake in what happens to a game before, during, and after launch. Understanding which stake belongs to whom is the difference between building a business and discovering, after the fact, that someone else built theirs on top of yours. Start with the platform cut, because it is where every calculation has to begin. Steam is where the majority of the indie market lives. The baseline revenue split is 70% to the developer and 30% to Valve. That 30% does not move until a single game clears $10 million in lifetime sales, at which point the cut drops to 25% on revenue above that threshold. Then and then to 20% above $50 million. For context, the overwhelming majority of games released on Steam never approach the first tier. Tens of thousands of titles launch every year. The median earner sits far below the level where those tiered discounts ever become relevant. That is the structure a developer is working inside before a single marketing decision has been made. The discovery problem is where the economics get genuinely brutal. Valve's own submission data confirms that Steam now receives over 14,000 new game releases per year. The platform's algorithm gives new releases a brief window in the new and trending section where organic visibility is possible, and once that window closes, the game competes for attention against everything that has ever launched on the platform. Simon Carles, who spent years documenting Steam's discovery architecture through his Game Discoverability newsletter, found that most games earn the majority of their lifetime revenue within the first 2 weeks on sale. Not most games that do well, most games, period. The back catalog rarely recovers meaningful visibility without a significant external event, a major sale, a viral video, a sequel announcement, or a streamer stumbling onto the title months after launch. To understand why the launch window is so structurally decisive, you have to look at how wishlists feed the algorithm before a game goes live. Wishlists are the primary signal Steam uses to determine how broadly to surface a new release at launch. A game entering its launch day with 10,000 wishlists and one entering with 100,000 are not competing on equal terms even if the games themselves are comparable in quality. The algorithm amplifies existing interest. It does not create it, which means the marketing work that determines a game's commercial ceiling is largely finished before the game is available to purchase. This brings us to the publisher deal structure that most gaming outlets either oversimplify or ignore entirely. An indie developer without capital has two realistic paths to bringing a larger-scale game to market: self-publish and absorb the development costs, porting costs, marketing costs, and platform certification fees independently, or sign with a publisher who provides upfront funding in exchange for a revenue share after recoupment. The word recoupment is where most deals become difficult to read accurately from the outside. Recoupment means the publisher recoups their full investment from the developer's share of revenue before any additional split begins. A deal structured as a 50-50 split post-recoupment means the developer earns nothing from their half until the publisher has been paid back entirely from the developer's 50%. Depending on the size of the advance and the game's actual sales trajectory, some developers have found themselves in situations where the game performed modestly well, the publisher was fully recouped, and the developer had still not cleared enough net revenue to cover their own operating costs during development. The arrangement is not inherently predatory. Publishers absorb real risk. Funding a game that never recoups is a complete loss on their side. But the structure creates a situation where the downside is shared, while the upside takes far longer to reach the developer than most contracts make explicit before signing. The Epic Games Store introduced an 88-12 revenue split in 2019, positioning it directly against Steam's 30% cut. The developer-favorable share drove a wave of timed exclusives in the first 2 years, most of them backed by Epic's own guaranteed minimum payments. That is the narrative the press coverage centered on. What the favorable cut could not resolve was the discovery gap, because the Epic Games Store's daily active user base remained a fraction of Steam's throughout that entire period. A better revenue percentage on a smaller audience does not automatically produce better outcomes, and the developers who took exclusivity deals without accounting for that difference found it out in their launch week numbers. Nintendo's eShop, the PlayStation Store, and the Microsoft Store operate on similar 70-30 structures to Steam for self-published titles, with the added cost of platform certification requirements and porting work that routinely runs between $10,000 and $50,000 per platform per version. A game that performs reasonably well on Steam and chooses to expand to all 3 major consoles may be looking at a 6-figure investment in ports before the expanded audience generates a single new sale. None of this means the economics of indie development are impossible to navigate. It means they are specific, and the specifics matter more than the dream version of the story suggests. The developers who consistently do well in this market are the ones who treat the launch window as the product, not the game. They build wishlist campaigns 12 to 18 months before release. They identify which platform algorithm gives their genre the highest organic reach. They calculate whether a publisher advance actually covers the porting budget and the marketing spend, or whether the advance is really a salary replacement that disappears entirely before launch without building any commercial infrastructure underneath the release. The games that struggle most are built on the assumption that quality resolves the discovery problem. It does not. A technically accomplished game with no wishlist base entering a platform with 14,000 annual competitors and a 2-week algorithm window is not facing a quality problem. It is facing a structural one, and quality is not the variable that addresses structure. Every year, a number of indie titles punch through the discovery ceiling without publisher backing and build audiences large enough to sustain studios and long careers. The path those games take is not mysterious when you look at what actually drove it. It ran through the wishlist count, the algorithm window, the platform cut, and the deal terms, in that order, long before it ran through the game itself. The dream is real. The economics around it are just more specific than the dream usually admits.